Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm T with Teresa H Creates, and this video is more gorgeous dyed paper. It has been a year since I recorded my process video for creating this dyed paper using Distress Spray Stain by Tim Holtz, and I thought it's been a year, it's time for an update. So we're going to revisit this whole process and try something a little new. So when I released that video, I was pretty excited because I had just discovered what would happen if I decided to tea dye paper and then also mix in some distress sprays and stains, and this was the result. These gorgeous dyed papers. They look a little bit like eco prints, kind of. That's what a lot of people said that they looked like, and at that time I had not really done anything with them. I had just discovered them. I was super excited with this whole look, and so I decided that I would record the video. And I had a lot of questions about what different inks would work and what paper specifically would work. I had a lot of suggestions about dyeing book pages and magazine pages and other items. And I had questions, I think, about the paper quality and all of that. And so I thought this is, and the most important question, the biggest question, how do you use it? So I wanted to go ahead and answer those questions and then also show you the original technique. I will link the old video or the original video in the description box. So if you want to go back and take a look at it, you can. But I am going to briefly review the basic technique here. And then I wanted to try a couple of different things. So I hope you stick around for that. First, I want to answer, what do I do with this? I was tea dyeing paper specifically for junk journals, and that's what I was going to use them for. Just pages in my junk journal. I wanted some nice decorative pages. So I've pulled together a couple of my junk journals that I've actually used this paper in recently. This is a tall, narrow journal, and this is some of my paper. I thought that it just looked fantastic with all of these colors. It really blended well. And instead of trimming it down to the size of the journal, I left it peeking out because it just looked fantastic, I thought, and gave it something a little bit extra. So this is the actual dyed paper in the journal. You can write on it. It's fine to write on. I've had questions like that. Can you write on it? And you can. So it's totally fine. For a different look, I have this journal as well, and I did cut these down to size, or these actually are, I think, just the correct size. And so I chose some papers that had a little bit more of the yellows and oranges in it to kind of go with these papers. And here they are. Is there another one? Maybe not. Okay, there we go. And so that was, that's what I do with them. Also had a lot of questions about tearing. You see here, there's a little bit of a torn edge. Some of them you do get some tearing when you're going through the process, and you can either leave it. I think it's great, like little texture. It adds a little bit of character. It's fine. It doesn't bother me to have a little bit of tearing. And so I do leave it in my projects, but you can also get a lot of tearing. Let me see. Okay, this one. You can get a lot of tearing like this, and I didn't want to toss the whole page. So a lot of times whenever I'm going through my journals and I want to use a page like this that has a tear, I either go ahead and use washi so it looks like it was intentional to cover that up or to tape that up, or I like using the vintage tape. This is some vintage tape that I did using that packing tape and alcohol inks technique, and I really like using that because I'm using a lot of these pages for journals and projects that are a little more vintage and dated looking anyway. So it really works well with that. I've had a lot of questions about whether or not getting it wet will reconstitute the spray stains and make them, you know, come back off the pages or bleed or what have you. I found that I did try a little section, and I found that it was very minimal. It was very minimal. Mostly it was the dark browns and the yellows, the oranges, that some of those, if you put like a Mod Podge or a gel medium over them, they would kind of soak through, but it was minimal and it really gave it kind of an aged look. It really didn't do like any damage as far as bleeding or just completely lifting off the paper or anything like that. So you can use it for those projects. And here are some things that I have done with it. I created a Frida Kahlo tag book, and I wanted to show you some of the things that I did, some of the techniques that I used. I did some die cutting of some papers with some greens and some turquoise that would coordinate with this. And then I used a clear emboss over it. And so this is what, I hope that it's shining and you can see it. So this is what came through. Let's see what else we have. Okay, this is some of the paper that I used, and this is just some gold emboss on it. So you can see the papers are very muted in the background, and then there's the gold emboss on it. Same here, that's the same. I wanted her to have a lovely kind of a crown halo. So again, I did a clear emboss and a die cut. So it's nice and shiny. It really makes those colors pop and shine through. If you're interested in seeing some of that, I can definitely put the links to these videos. There were several of them. I kind of did the videos a little bit at a time. Again, with the gold emboss. And then, okay, you can stamp on it. This is just a VersaFine Onyx Black ink over some of the pages. This paper is actually the same paper, this background paper and these. So this background paper, very muted, looks fantastic, but when I clear embossed it and die cut these little flowers, it really made those details and those colors pop. So there is that. And then let's see. Okay. No, there's nothing there. Okay. I did a black emboss over the paper, a lot of contrast. Again, this was the clear emboss. And then, okay, and then this one, I did a clear emboss on the paper. And then to make that image pop, I took some, I think it was walnut ink, Distress ink, and then used the blending tool to kind of blend around the image and then wiped it clean. So that's what, it makes it kind of pop and stand out. So that's what a clear emboss looks like on it. So those are some of the projects that I use these papers on. And then I had a lot of questions about different types of paper that you use. I did try this technique on some natural coffee filters. You have to be very careful when balling these up because obviously they're super fragile. So I used the technique on this, and then this was the result. I really like those. So you can use them to create like what coffee filter flowers. Look at that, that's gorgeous. Or, you know, just use it like you would kind of a doily that you put in your junk journals and your signatures. But that's what it looked like. So I did want to show that result. And then I also use the same technique on tissue paper. Had to be very careful, again, with the balling it up. But there you go. That's what that looks like on the tissue paper. I did not iron this. I actually afterwards just kind of flattened it out, and that's why it's folded up, because then I put it under a book after I kind of flattened it out and left it there. I have not actually used this in a project. So again, this would be one of those times that if you were Mod Podging it onto something or using a glue to put it down, would it reconstitute? Because this one has a lot of those reds and yellows, and it's actually a tissue paper instead of paper. It might. I haven't tried it, so I don't know. But it might just come through a little bit on the glue. Like I said, it wasn't a lot. It was just a little bit when I did this process. So I just say it's worth experimenting with. I just haven't done it yet. Okay, and then I also had a lot of questions about what would metallics look like micas, and then what would... and then I did have the oxides, and I wanted to be very clear about the oxides. I use them sparingly when I do this process. I use the oxides sparingly. Okay, that's an example. I have another one here. It's this guy. Because the oxides, unlike the Distress spray stain, the oxides are actually chalky. So they will dry, chalky looking on your paper. So it just gives it a different look. Now it doesn't do a lot of transferring. This has been folded. It's not doing much, but this will reconstitute. That chalk sits right up on that edge, and it will rub off. I mean, you might be able to see a little bit of my finger. Not a lot, see, but a little bit. Some of it will rub off. So just so that you know, you can use the oxides, but I tend to use them sparingly just because they're a lot more opaque. And so they kind of just, they cover areas rather than kind of highlighting areas, if that makes sense. Okay, and then this one, I think, can you see the gold shimmer? That's pretty, right? All that gold shimmer. I sprayed some of this Spray Stain Antique Bronze And I'm guessing it probably has mica in it, and that's what makes it shine, but that's what this is. So the mica sprays, the Distress mica stains would probably work just fine with this technique as well. So there's that. Okay, let's get down to what you're going to need to do this, what supplies you need. So I have plain white copy paper. I don't know in the original video, I haven't gone back and looked at it, I'm sorry, if I explained exactly what paper this was. At the time, I was so excited about the whole process that I don't know. And I said just use plain white copy paper, which is exactly what I have here. Now, I order HP 22 pound, I believe it's a 22 weight paper, very bright. I think it's a 96 bright. I will add a link to the description box for the exact paper that I use, just in case that makes a difference. If you go with a lighter paper, you could risk more tearing because it would be flimsier. If you go with a heavier paper, you don't really get as much crumpling, and so it doesn't settle as much. So this is what I use, and I will put it in the description box so that you can check it out if you're wanting to use it as well. I did try magazine paper, but because the magazine, or it was encyclopedia paper, because they're slick, those slick papers really didn't take the color much, and it looked more like just a faint staining as opposed to any actual dyeing process. So I didn't continue with those. I only did a couple, and they were just kind of meh. If you wanted to do it, you could try, but I just wouldn't waste my supplies on doing the papers that have, you know, some sort of a slick surface. It really just didn't do well. I didn't try book pages because, again, I just thought that they were probably a little bit too thin to use with this process and might fall apart. But I also use a lot of older book pages in my projects and not newer stuff. The newer stuff might do better. I don't know. It's worth giving it a try though. So anyhow, along with the paper, you are going to need a bin that's large enough to fit a whole sheet of paper. And I've got tea in here. I use just a basic Louisiana tea. You can use any tea that you want. I'm just saying this is what I use. I do use the family size, gallon size tea bags because I will make several gallons of this, and I use a couple of bags because I only do my tea dyeing one period throughout the year. Like, I just do it once, I get it all done and taken care of. And like I said, it's been almost a year, so I'm running out of my stock and I need to replenish. So I'm actually, I don't know if you can see it, I'm actually in the process of doing a lot of tea dyeing and spray stain dyeing now. And so that's why we're revisiting this. But there were a couple of things that I wanted to try that were a little bit different. So I thought, you know what, we'll do it. I typically do this process outside because it can be messy, and because I'm doing so many at one time, it does get pretty messy. But for the purposes of demonstrating this, I'm doing it inside my studio. So I did put down some wax paper to protect my surface. I do have an apron on to protect my clothing. I have this bin with the tea ready to go. I have this bucket where I'll put the paper in and then use it to spray. And then I have trays here that when I ball the paper up, I'll put them on the trays and then let them dry there. Now, when I work outside, I'm using a huge 6-foot table, and I'm not really worried about the surface of the table. It's plastic. So I work on one end doing all my dyeing, and then on the other end of the table, I'm just tossing those balls. So they're just laid out. I don't have a tray for that. If you're doing it inside, I would recommend having a tray. If you're doing it outside on a table that you're not worried about the surface, I wouldn't worry about the tray. Not a big deal. All right. I am going to use my gloves because it does get quite messy, and the stains will start to get in all the grooves, and you will have very inky fingers very quickly. I used the gloves in my process when we were tea dyeing, or we were doing all the dyeing yesterday, and that's how I got this staining, because I took them off to do the cleanup. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. Okay, so this is the original process. We're going to dunk the paper in. We're not going to let it sit there and soak. We're just going to dunk it in real quick, right? It comes right out. Now it's sitting here. We're going to spray our stains on it, just at random. It doesn't matter. This is the process, or the part of it that you want to do that's very quickly. That was tea dye. That is wild honey. It is my absolute favorite color. And now let's add a pop of color to this. This is the salvaged patina. You're going to pick it up and ball it. I usually ball from the center and fold in, and then there you go. This is my ball. It is not tight. You don't want to roll it into a ball or squeeze it. You just want to be gentle with it. Put it in a ball. The edges you're going to want kind of near the outside like this, so that whenever you're pulling them open, they're not tucked into these grooves and ripping. That's where you get a lot of the tearing. I learned that, and I think that throughout the process last time, and I don't know if I mentioned it in the last video, but I want to mention it now just because I know a lot of people experienced tearing, and so that's how you want to fold those balls. I typically start with my lighter colors first, the ones that I'm going to use that have softer, more muted tones. Let's use some Wild Honey. And we'll go ahead and do one with the, let me see, I've got Salvage Patina. Let's see a Cracked Pistachio. Okay, and we'll do a Cracked Pistachio. Look at that color. And I do 2 to 3. I don't really do more than that. Like I said, pick it up and ball it. There we go, on the tray. You'll notice that you're going to start getting dye and tea sitting here. And I know that if I was using paints, I would be worried because the water would get very muddy. I don't know, I'm not a chemist, so I don't know the actual nature of how this ink works, but it actually starts to pick up the colors on the back. That's why I'm not spraying both sides. It will start to pick up these colors that are sitting in this bucket, so don't worry that it gets too full. If it gets really full, if you're doing a ton of them, sometimes I will empty it out if I think, oh, if I'm using too much of one color and it becomes overpowering, like everything's going to have a hint of green on it, because there was a lot of green in my bucket, then I might. But it's going to pick that up in the background. We did a Cracked Pistachio spray stain, so let's do a darker. Let's do a Scorched Timber, because that's a newer color. I don't think I had the Scorched Timber when I did it last time. And we're going to add the Distress Oxide in Cracked Pistachio. That way you can see the difference between the ink, the spray stain and the oxide spray. All right, let's do one more. So I gradually work from my lighter colors to my darker colors. I went ahead and used a Scorched Timber. The bases that I like a Wild Honey. I like the Fossilized Amber. Rusty Hinge is a good one. It kind of gives a little bit of an orangey. But then, let me see, Abandoned Coral. Let's see what that looks like. We were trying to use more greens and reds because I really wanted some that I could use for Christmas papers. So we've got 4 there. We will open those up and see what they look like later, but let's move on to a different technique. So a lot of questions I had, does this work with other inks? I don't know, because I didn't try other inks. I only did the spray stains because that's what I was excited about. But I do have a lot of old Delusions sprays. So I've got these ink sprays. And you know what? I probably should have tested these out because I don't know if they're actually going to spray. I haven't used them in forever. So, but we will try it out. So I am going to try the same technique using these Delusion sprays, and we'll see what we get, because these are a very bright spray. So the papers, we're just going to see how those are going to turn out. And then we'll get an idea of whether or not that's a good process. I'm going to put it differently on the paper there and move on to the next one. Again, I don't know if this is going to work. We'll try a few though, and then I'll do a reveal, and we'll find out together whether or not it's going to look okay. All right. So that's 2. Let's do one more. Let's see, some orange. If you end up having a bottle that's not spraying for you, don't worry about it. What I typically do is if I have a bottle that won't spray, oh, look at that. Speak of the devil. If I have one that won't spray, you can do this. You can also use your re-inkers and go ahead and put them down as well. It's not a big deal. That was a lot. I didn't intend to put that much on there, so let's see. Nope, that one doesn't work either. Let's get another color in here and see if we can get it moving. All right. And see, these might end up being sprays. Well, that one will be interesting. These might end up being sprays that do, see, they start getting really muddy. And that may just be the case with these. Okay. that is it for them. You are also gonna need some paper towels. Sorry, I didn't mention that. I'm going to clean this out, try to soak this up as much as possible. And then I wanted to go to the next step. So let me go ahead and redo my working space here, and then I'll be right back with the next setup. All right, now I'm back with my next setup. So I wanted to give water a try. So I wanted to see what water would do with these spray stains and spray inks. So let me set this aside. I have a separate tray for that so we can keep them completely separate. So I am going to do water with the Distress sprays and then water with the Delusions. So let's get at it. I never tried this with water. My thought is that it's going to obviously make these move, right? But my thought is that it is going to not stain the paper. So the background paper is going to be nice and bright, and these colors are really going to pop on the actual paper because it's clear and not staining. And that's kind of my guess as far as it goes. And so this would be a good technique if it works, if you're wanting to use, let me see, what was that? That was Uncharted Mariner. Let's see, and this is tea dye. That would be a good one if you are doing really bright colors, or if you're doing more abstract, maybe more modern pieces, and you really don't need that tea dye in there to make it look, you know, a little bit more distressed. That would be a good one. Let's try something different. This is Pine Needle. And then let's go ahead and add some of this oxide spray to this one and see what that does. And let's add a little bit of Wild Honey on these edges. So that way we can also see what the oxides do with the water. But yeah, my guess would be that the paper behind it, the background paper, will just be lighter. All right, now we're going to try water and the ink sprays. And let's see what that does. I live in Texas. It gets extremely hot. The temp's been around 96. So I wait until it gets really hot. I do all of my stuff outside, and then I put it out there to dry. I leave it out there. It dries all at one time very quickly. So it dries in the day, and then I just don't mess with it any other time. Get it all done at once. I just do a whole ream of paper and then other odds and ends that I've got around. What was that one? That one was peeled paint. And I'm gonna do some more Wild Honey. I just like the Wild Honey. It's my favorite with this. I guess y'all saw my mistake, right? I just went in there with these dyes because that's what's in front of me. We're doing Delusions, Teresa. Okay, back to Delusions. Here we go. Oh, goodness. Okay. They'll dry very quickly for me out there. If you live in warmer climates, that's what I would recommend, that you just leave them out in the sun, let them dry that way. I do go out and flip them. So while they're laying out there at some point during the day, once the edges start really getting, you know, nice and dry, I'll go out and I'll flip them over so that the bottoms will also dry, and that kind of helps move it along a little bit. All right, that's 3. Let's do one more of these so that we've got a good representation, you know, of what's happening. And maybe I'll use one of the smaller bottles. I thought these might have had some mica in it, but I don't think so. I think that these are just smaller bottles. Yeah, this is just ink spray. I think they sell these in the smaller bottles now and not the big bottles that I have. All right, there we go. So that is 4. I think we've got like 4 of each kind, I believe. So there we are. I am going to clean up this mess, put these guys outside to dry, then we'll come back and finish the rest of the process and see what we get. Welcome back. It's been about 5 hours. I had these outside drying and now we're ready for the big reveal. I have a towel down to protect my surface. This is just my craft room towel, so it is dirty. I apologize for that, but it, you know, it gets the job done. And then I have my iron. I set mine on either the nylon or the wool setting, so either the second lowest or second from the bottom. So just you want to keep it in the low range. And then I don't allow any steam. I don't put any steam on it because I don't want them to get wet. Now we're going to unwrap them. It's like Christmas time. These are the ones that we did with water. I'm going to set those aside. We can do those last. Let's go ahead and start with these guys. So these up here are going to be the ones that we did with the Distress Stain Sprays and tea. So here we go. And you can see they're fairly easy to unwrap. And you might get some, like I said, some tearing, but nothing crazy. And if you do, you can still, I usually find that parts of it are at least salvageable, so that's not a problem. What color is that? I've been getting a lot of this. I want to say, I think that this is what is happening with that Scorched Timber. It's turning kind of a blackish, a purple black color. I don't mind it, but I don't love it. It's a little bit darker than what I would want. If I was doing like a purple and black for Halloween paper, I would probably use that. But I think that when I do my next batch, I'm going to leave the Scorched Timber out and just stick with the bases that I know. So the bases that I absolutely love to use are the Wild Honey, Tea Dye, for sure. Rusty Hinge is also a good one. And that Fossilized Amber. Those are what give a lot of the nice gold tones in here. And so I think that when I go back out to do my next batch, and I like to do these in batches. I do iron front and back. I like to do these in batches so that I can get an idea of what I have and what I need. So if I need papers with, maybe I want some that are a little bit more neutral, or I want papers that have you know, more reds or yellows, or I want darker ones, more greens and blues, then there you go. And it's like Christmas, and here is the big reveal, and it's so pretty. And I did get a lot of questions about why I ironed, and it's just to get the wrinkles out. I don't, you know, I'm using them in my journals, they're signature pages. And while I'm very tactile, I like a lot of texture, this would be hard to use. So that is why I iron. And it doesn't take much, just to pass front and back. That is all it takes. So this is something that I'll point out to you. Now, they're a little bit lighter. And the reason they're a little bit lighter is because this is like the very beginning of the batch. So like I said, when you swipe it through the tea and you put it down, you start to collect that tea and color underneath. And that's what picks up and really dyes the back sides of them as well. So these are pretty light. I did like colors, but they're also, you can see the tea dye in here, but it isn't really dark and saturated yet. So a lot of times your first few that you do until you get the hang of it and you're really getting in there, they might be a little bit lighter. All right, and then these, let me set these over here. These are the ones that we did with the tea and the Delusions sprays. And I got a lot of suggestions on inks and everything, and I used those sprays, the Tim Holtz Distress sprays, because that's what I had on hand. And honestly, I use them, but I don't use them a ton. And they were sitting there and they were collecting dust, and I didn't want to just spray paper and just have spritz marks everywhere. So I decided that I would put them to use. And I know the basics of how they work. Oh my goodness. Okay. I know the basics of how they work. So that is why I went ahead and used those. I knew that if I did dip it in the tea first, so that's why you want to do it in the tea first, because then you want the tea on the paper to create the movement of the ink on the paper to get all of this nice color in here. Do you see these darker spots on these pages? This right here. A lot of my papers have them. We've got some of it in here. This is actually what happens whenever you dry these outside, because they're literally baking in the sun. And so if you're wanting those marks like that, if you're wanting that kind of a effect, then let them dry outside. Now, you may be able to dry them in the oven and get the same effect. I don't know. I've never done any dyeing and then drying in the oven. So if any of you out there do dye papers in the oven, please let us know. Can you put them in the oven and get that same effect while they're baking in there? I would think that you could, but I also don't know how well these would actually dry crumpled up in the oven, you know, because they have to be out in the sun for quite a while, and I do have to go out and turn them in order for it to work. So this was a very different look. These are very bright, much brighter than the Distress sprays, and I'm not surprised by that at all, because they are much brighter colors in general. So I actually really like this effect. I don't think that, I don't know, for some reason it looks a little bit more watercolor to me than even the Distress sprays do. I don't know. What do you guys think? I think it does. It looks a little bit more watercolory. This almost looks tie-dye. That's what it is. These look a little more eco print, and again, maybe because they're more muted colors, and this looks more tie-dye. I love both. I think that there is room in my stash for both to use both of these. So I'm actually excited because I haven't used those sprays in quite a while. So that is nice. Nice to know. Okay, so this is what we did with the water. And this is the first time I've tried this. And again, when we don't have the tea base there, that's going to stain the paper, the white of the paper, you know, then we're kind of left with what is this going to look like? Is it still going to move the inks the same way? How much white is going to be left on the paper? And honestly, this is the reason this started. So I am afraid of white space. I don't like it. I don't know why it bothers me so much. I'm working on it, but when I'm doing my journals, I have to cover up all the white space. So I either have to go in and stencil over it, or I've got to, you know, do some kind of a wash on it. And I usually do like a tea dye, but then after a while, it's like tea dye, tea dye, tea dye. And, you know, eventually you kind of want something different, a different look. And so that's why I did this, because I didn't want to go in and just straight spray. If you go in and you just straight spray, then it doesn't really move a whole lot. You're just getting, you know, you're just getting it wherever you sprayed it directly, and then that's it. It's not really moving anywhere else. And then you've got all the splatters and everything, which is fine if that's the look that you're going for. But it wasn't. I really wanted something that was going to be dyed. I needed something that was going to dye easily. You know, be a very quick process, or an easy well, this isn't super quick, but it was going to be an easy process. Does that make sense? It wasn't going to be anything complicated. And that this, I don't think, is complicated. I thought that it was, that it's actually fairly simple. It is a little bit time intensive, but it's simple. I think it's pretty easy. And again, I only do this in batches once a year, you know, maybe twice a year. I might do some more, I don't know. And I do a lot, and they last me a good year. So, and this is only the 4th batch that I've ever done. I started doing them last year, and this is the 4th batch. And so this is what we've got. again, like Christmas. What do we have here? Okay, so do you see this spotting, this freckling here? It almost looks like it's molding, like the paper's molding. That is because I didn't get enough water, and it does it with the tea as well in some occasions. I didn't get enough water in that area or tea. It wasn't wet enough on the paper, so when it sprayed, it got into the paper and stayed there. So usually when I spray, that stain is sitting right on top of that liquid, either the water or the tea, and it's moving it around. And so that's all that means. It's not a right or wrong. That's just all that means. It's just that it got directly on the paper, so it sprayed there. Okay, so this is the water. And this turned out exactly the way I thought that it would. They're lighter. They're brighter, obviously, because they don't have that tea as an undertone there. And so let's kind of put those side by side, and you can see the more yellowish and then the whiter. So if you're doing something modern or something with brighter colors, or you really don't want to do the tea dye, you can use water, and then you end up with this effect. And then you can use the tea dye and you have something that's maybe a little bit more vintage. So I like them both. Let me keep them separated. I don't know why I'm putting them together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now let's do the water with the Dylusions. Look at that. Again, these look like dye. And I think it's just because these colors are just so bright and vibrant. I left these outside for five hours. I typically do these in the morning and then leave them out all day. So they're usually out a good 8 or 9 hours. And that's just a personal preference. I really like that burning, that baking of that paper. I really like it to be quite pronounced. I like it to be quite dark. These colors are absolutely gorgeous. Okay, let's give them a real quick swipe so you can see the whole thing. And then there we go. I hope that you have enjoyed this and that you give it a try. I know when I did this video the first time, it really took off and a lot of people gave it a try. I got tagged in a lot of videos and I got mentions, and I saw people sharing it in Facebook pages, and it was lovely to see what other people were doing and creating. I enjoyed seeing that so much. And then the things that they were coming up with the stencils and doing different things with it was just fantastic. And a lot of them, I think, were happy with the results. There were some that didn't quite get the results they had expected. And so I would chime in and offer some suggestions, things that maybe you could change or do. And it just really was a lot of fun. So if you're inspired to do this for the first time or inspired to do it again, and you record it, please mention or tag me, because I would love to see the results. I would absolutely love it. Look at how gorgeous this is. I got to be honest with you. I don't know which one I love more. So here is the water with the Dylusion sprays. Water, Distress, Dylusions. And they look so different. And then I want to say, honestly, I think the Dylusions had more travel than the Distress sprays. So this is the tea with the Distress. We'll put them together again. And then this is the Dylusions. See? Brighter. Muted, brighter. So it's just a personal preference, whichever one that you like. And then let me give you a close-up again. This is the one that I really gave a real good spray of the oxide. And that's that oxide. So you can see how it got in all those little grooves, and it's really chalky. It's still beautiful, but it is chalky. And so I just wanted you to know I wouldn't go in with a ton of oxides. I would use it sparingly. Unless this is the look that you're going for, then have at it. That's totally fine. But just wanted you to know what that was going to look like for sure. let me move this out of the way. So we ended up with just some beautiful, beautiful papers. And then I wanted to go ahead and show you the papers that I was working on. This is my first batch of distress sprays. I did go in with some lighter colors, some Tattered Rose, some Victorian Velvet. So I got a little bit of the pinks, and this is Tea Dye and Victorian Velvet and the Tattered Rose and Speckled Egg. And I used all of my Speckled Egg. You can see maybe little hints of blue in there, and that's what that Speckled Egg is. So this was Tea Dye. These were all very light, neutral colors. My daughter, who helps me out, played around with making kind of rainbow colors, adding a lot more than just the traditional 2 to 3 colors that I use. And so she ended up making some beautiful papers with that. Let me get some more. There we go. Look at this. Look at this. And this is with the distress and the tea. But here we go. These are the papers. These are the papers in my first batch. And now I think I need to go in and get more blues and greens, I think. And then, yeah, I'll need my second batch will have to be more blues and greens. But just wanted to share those with you. Those are the results from our first batch. Anyhow, I'm so happy that you spent some time with me. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments section below. I answer all questions and comments. I do respond. And please feel free to share and subscribe if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, bye.